I watched him kill them. He would either beat them with the barrel or just shoot them point blank. Brain matter scattered all across the yard. I heard him. I saw him dragging the bodies. Late at night, a call comes into the police. A girl, barely able to breathe, gasps into the phone. "Help us. We're being killed." When officers arrived at the address, they found a scene none of them would ever forget. Someone had walked into that house and massacred 9 people, a group of friends and neighbors spending a summer evening at a dacha in the village of Redkino, Tver Oblast. Only one person survived, a young woman who crawled under a blanket and prayed the killer wouldn't find her, lying completely still while she listened to the unbearable screaming of people she loved, killed one after another just meters away. This story sounds like the script of a horror film. It is not. It happened in Redkino, a settlement of around 10,000 people in Tver Oblast, Russia. This is one of the most brutal cases ever documented. And tonight, we reconstruct the full chronology of that bloody night in detail, exactly as it happened. When police entered the house, they saw the worst scene of their careers. Enormous amounts of blood, brain matter, 9 naked bodies piled on top of each other. One of the victims, a man named Oleg, had been forced to dig his own grave with his bare hands before he was killed. He managed to dig a shallow pit. Then the shooter struck him in the head twice with the rifle butt and said, "Now go dig a grave for your friend." Then he fired. The last victim was killed near a car. She tried to run. She didn't make it. The crime scene footage from that night is so graphic it cannot be shown here. This is real. This happened. The evening of June 3rd, 2017, a garden cooperative called 50 Years of October, located in the settlement of Redkino, roughly 156 kilometers from Moscow, just outside Tver. The Savelyev family was hosting a gathering at their dacha. Neighbors had come over. By 9:30 in the evening, they were making shashlik. By midnight, the party was still going. Then a car pulled up to the house. A short man got out. Some of the neighbors recognized him. He was the local electrician who had recently done wiring work for one of the guests. A normal guy came by, read the meter, said hello, and left, one neighbor would later recall. When they told us what happened, I didn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. The man greeted the Savelyev family and introduced himself. Conversation started up, casual, ordinary conversation, until the subject turned to military service. The electrician, Sergei Yegorov, mentioned he had served in the airborne forces, the VDV, Russia's elite paratroopers. One of the men at the gathering was an actual paratrooper. He looked at Yegorov, short, slight, unimpressive physically, and laughed. There was no way this man had served in the VDV. The mockery spread. Others joined in, including jokes about the fact that Yegorov, at 45 years old, still lived with his mother. The host and his son-in-law said Yegorov was too small and scrawny for the airborne. And they were technically right. Yegorov had actually served in the border forces, not the VDV. But that distinction didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the humiliation. The argument escalated. Yegorov became aggressive, lunging toward the people who had mocked him. He was shoved back with threats and profanity and told to leave. He shouted that everyone there would regret this. Someone said, "Get out, or you'll catch a beating." Yegorov turned around. He didn't walk away. He ran to his car and drove off hard. Who could have imagined that a trivial argument over military service would become one of the worst tragedies in recent Russian history? 2.5 hours later, Yegorov came back. He was carrying a hunting carbine, a Saiga, and 15 rounds of ammunition. Despite the fact that he had returned with a loaded weapon, the group continued mocking him. When Yegorov finally raised the carbine, the laughter stopped. Someone said, "Come on, man, you did the wiring for us. You're a normal guy."
but it was already too late. Yegorov opened fire. He would later claim he shot all his victims from a single magazine. At first, everyone ran for cover inside the house. As the shooting continued, they tried to escape from it. One of the victims didn't make it 10 meters to his own dacha. Yegorov caught up with him and shot him in the head. At 2:41 in the morning, Marina Kanyagina called emergency services and begged for help. The operator responded, "Are you joking? Don't you have anything better to do?" The call dropped. Marina called again. The second operator took her seriously and immediately dispatched police to the address.
Here is the timeline of what happened between 2:35 a.m. and the moment police arrived. 6 people were outside when it started. Soft music was playing. People were still talking. Then a loud shot rang out, followed by a scream. At 2:35, the first shot is fired. Many of the group had already gone to sleep by then. The first to die is Vyacheslav Savelyev. I hear cursing. The first one. They're killing Slava. I see blood flying, brain matter, all of it. Slava dropped immediately. The shooter then moves toward Alexander Redin, cursing as he walks. He strikes Redin in the head with the rifle butt. "Go dig a grave for your friend. He's already dead." Then he fires. Redin falls. At this moment, Marina is calling 112. A third shot follows. Pavel Smirnov is killed. The women beg the shooter not to kill them. They tell him they have children. Yegorov orders them to start digging graves and enters the house. Inside, in one of the bedrooms, Marina Kanyagina is in bed. With her is her dog, a small Spitz named Benya. She pulls the blanket over herself and the dog and doesn't move. Benya would normally growl and bark at strangers. I whispered in his ear, "Benya, quiet. Please, just quiet." And I swear to God, for the first time in my life, I watched that dog hold its breath. That actually happened. Yegorov steps onto the veranda and knocks on the interior door. The Lyudmila Vysotskaya doesn't understand what is happening. She assumes it's one of the guests. She opens the door. Yegorov immediately strikes Ivan Zagoryan, who is standing nearby with the rifle butt. "Go dig a grave for your friend. He's already dead." He fires. Zagoryan is killed. Vysotskaya falls to her knees, weeping. Yegorov says, "Stop whining." He shoots her. In a back bedroom, 92-year-old Galina Savelyeva, a veteran of the Second World War, never even gets up from her bed. Yegorov shoots her where she lies. Then the killer begins moving through the rooms. He enters the room where Marina is hiding. He approaches the bed. He looks around. He leans against the edge of the mattress and peers underneath it. He finds nothing. He leaves. At some point, Benya runs out of air under the blanket. He starts to wheeze. Yegorov hears the sound. He comes back into the room. My bed is right here. I'm under the blanket. He's standing right there. I can see him through the fabric. He looks. He stands there. He leaves. He comes back with a can of gasoline. There's another small sound. He comes back again. This time, he looks directly at the bed. I understand that if he lifts that blanket right now, I cease to exist. At that exact moment, police arrive outside. In the next room, Vera Smirnova, wife of the already killed Pavel, is on her knees, begging. She tells him about her children. Yegorov says nothing. He fires. Nearby, Oleg Demchenko had been hiding. Yegorov found him and wounded him, but Oleg managed to flee. He ran to the neighboring house and warned the people there. By then, the neighbors had already woken up from the sound of gunfire. They hid. Marina, still under the blanket, hears Yegorov walking among the bodies after the shooting stops, finishing off anyone still moving. A minute later, he heads toward the neighboring house, the same house Oleg ran to. Oleg speaks. "You're a normal person, please, don't do this." 3 more shots. Yegorov shoots Oleg first. Then he wounds Svetlana Sorokina. She doesn't die from the bullet. She starts moaning, so Yegorov beats her in the head with a metal chair until she stops. He returns to the Savelyev property and fires 1 additional shot into each body already on the ground. Then Yegorov begins dragging the bodies inside. He moves 4 of them from the yard into the house. At some point while he is doing this, Benya the dog wheezes or sneezes under the blanket. Marina can't tell which, and Yegorov hears it. He enters her room, approaches the bed, looks around, leans on the edge, checks underneath, finds nothing, leaves. Then police arrive, and remarkably, Sergei Yegorov surrenders without any resistance whatsoever. Officers find him dragging the last body. When they shout at him to drop the weapon and get on the ground, he complies immediately and calmly. Officers had observed the house first, waiting deliberately for the moment when the shooter set down his weapon before moving in, fully aware that he could offer armed resistance. When Marina heard police outside, she climbed out from under the blanket and saw the full extent of what had happened. Bodies piled on top of each other, some missing parts of their heads, some missing limbs, internal organs across the floor. All of the bodies were nearly naked. Yegorov had undressed them. When Marina walked out to the officers, she said, "Boys, there's the rifle. Let me shoot him."
"You can say I was acting in self-defense." They told her not to. When Yegorov saw someone walk out of the house alive, he was visibly stunned. Marina was the only survivor inside that house that night. So who was Sergei Yegorov, and how does a man become a mass killer? Yegorov was born on January 19, 1972, Epiphany Day. He later said he believed his birthday was a sign that something meaningful was destined to happen to him. He grew up with a younger brother named Lyosha. In childhood, Yegorov was considered a model student. He didn't drink or smoke until he was 20. Neighbors and classmates described him as calm and well-behaved, though extremely introverted. He stood 155 centimeters tall, roughly 5'1". He was mocked for it throughout his school years. He grew up in a troubled home. His father drank constantly and beat his mother, who was herself small and frail. Yegorov watched all of it and could do nothing. He would later say his mother was his god. He loved her intensely and would not have allowed anyone to harm her. He served in the military at 19, in the border forces, not the airborne, despite what he told people. After discharge, he met a woman, moved in with her, and had a daughter. Eventually, the relationship ended. He moved back to his mother's dacha in the S&T 50 Years of October cooperative. His former partner and their daughter, who was in university by 2017, stayed in Moscow. Before the massacre, Yegorov had no criminal record. He had never been on any psychiatric register. By every external measure, he was a functioning, ordinary person. He had a job. He drank occasionally, but not to excess. He had gotten the electrician position at the cooperative only about 2 weeks before the killings. Residents noted he sometimes smelled of alcohol when he came to read meters, but his behavior was considered normal. His girlfriend at the time, Olga Sadikova, who lived in the same village, described him as calm and steady. He had never raised a hand to her. When neighbors asked for help, he always helped. She would not have called him a touchy person, but there was something buried in him. As a teenager, after a particularly bad fight, his father had thrown both him and his mother out of the house in winter. A relative took them in. Yegorov swore he would get revenge on his father. He was still telling that story as a 40-year-old man. It had never left him. And after his arrest, He insisted that the gathering that night had insulted his mother, mocked him for living with her. Just as with his father, he could not let it go. Only this time, he decided to force an apology. In his own words, he took the rifle and drove to the Savelyev property to make them apologize. But once he arrived, something shifted. He felt power, superiority over the people who had humiliated him, and he used it.
The weapon was legally owned.
He sometimes used it for hunting. Yegorov also told investigators that on the morning of the killings, he had experienced a kind of vision. 5 men threatening him, and him killing them. That evening, it played out almost exactly as he had seen it. He described the vision himself in interview. 5 guys at a dacha. They were going to come at me over the wiring, wanted to cut me up, bury me. With one easy movement, I took the heads off all 5 of them. The investigation moved quickly. 3.5 months after the massacre, trial began. Before that, Yegorov was examined at the Serbsky Center for Psychiatric Evaluation. Specialists found him completely sane and fully responsible for his actions. He could not explain his own behavior. It was like I was walking through fog for a month afterward. I couldn't believe it. Some meaningless hallucination, and then, out of nowhere, I went and killed all those people. It felt like a dream. When the time came for a lineup, the survivor Marina was offered the option of viewing the killer from behind one-way glass so he couldn't see her. She refused. She wanted to look him in the eye. One detail emerged during the investigation that added complexity to the night. Vyacheslav Savelyev, Marina's boyfriend, the first to be killed, had reportedly been physically abusive toward her on multiple occasions and had a volatile, aggressive temperament. He may well have been the one who escalated the initial confrontation with Yegorov. At trial, the families of the victims faced the killer for the first time. They held up photographs of the dead and screamed at him to look, to memorize their faces. "Let Yegorov spend the rest of his life seeing our people," said the sister of Oleg Demchenko. Especially Oleg and Sveta. They treated him well, and this so-called good person killed them like animals. Journalists described Yegorov's demeanor throughout the trial as completely blank. He stared at a fixed point. He showed nothing. He did not contest the charges. For a long time, he offered no words of remorse. Then, on September 5th, at a court session, he stated that he would not object to the death penalty being applied to him. He said, "There is no forgiveness for what I did, but I ask for forgiveness. I am ready to face punishment. I want to say this one last time. Forgive me. I killed. I don't know why, but I killed." On September 12th, 2017, 45-year-old Sergei Yegorov was sentenced to life imprisonment. He stood to receive the verdict. During his final statement, he asked for forgiveness. Compensation to the victims' families was set at 10.5 million rubles. The reading of the sentence took over 2 hours, as the judge enumerated, injury by injury, the forensic descriptions of each gunshot wound. Mothers of the dead had to be helped out of the courtroom. On September 21st, Yegorov filed an appeal requesting that his life sentence be reduced to 20 years, citing mitigating circumstances, the victim's provocative behavior, and his cooperation with investigators. The appeal was denied. Life in prison is better than execution, better than a bullet. Let him live. Let him live with their faces in front of him and with the pain of what he did, including what he did to his own mother. In a later interview, Yegorov reflected on his appeal. "I don't expect anything from it. Everyone files one, so I filed one too. What is there to hope for? The sentence is just. By any human measure, I deserve either life or the firing squad. But the firing squad, that's the easy way out.
I should sit out the rest of my days and suffer. Sergei Yegorov was transferred to the city of Solikamsk in the Orenburg Oblast, to the penal colony known as Black Dolphin, Russia's most notorious maximum security prison for life-sentenced convicts. In subsequent interviews, Yegorov said that if the people at that gathering had simply apologized for insulting his mother, none of it would have happened. He claimed he had no intention of harming anyone when he first drove away. He said the anger only took over once he arrived back on the property with the weapon in his hands. A note on accuracy. In the weeks following the massacre, many Russian newspapers and websites published significant factual errors about this case. Some reported that Yegorov had already been on the property doing electrical work for the Savlievs that evening. That is false. The Savliev family did not know him, had never invited him, and he had never set foot on their property before the night of the murders.
Some outlets reported that the first shot was accidental. Also false. Yegorov fired without waiting for a response after a direct confrontation. And one more thing that must be said. In the aftermath of the massacre, strangers on the internet began accusing Marina Kanyagina, the sole survivor, of being complicit in the killings. It was established beyond any doubt that she had never met Yegorov before that night. She survived by hiding under a blanket. She lost her boyfriend, her friends, people she loved. And then she had to endure accusations from people who weren't there. She was 21 years old.
I'm not his lover. I didn't sleep with him. Why are people accusing me of having a relationship with the man who killed people I knew, people I loved? Say I talked to him, say I put him up to it. Fine, that's a real accusation, but that? Any normal person would react the same way I did. 9 years have passed. Marina Kanyagina rebuilt her life.
She completed her university degree despite nearly dropping out after the tragedy. Her career advanced steadily. In late December 2023, she was appointed store director. In 2019, she got married to a man who started as a friend and became something more. A few years later, they had a son named Myron. At the time of her most recent interviews, Marina and her husband had separated, but she describes herself as happy. She has her mother, her brothers, her child, her work, and her dog. I'm alive. At the end of the day, that's enough for me. She still lives with the contradiction of survival. On one side, why wasn't I there next to Slava? Maybe I should have been there with him. On the other, maybe God left me alive for a reason. 9 people who had done nothing wrong begged for their lives that night. They pleaded with him, and he shot them anyway, one by one. She doesn't fully understand why she is still here. Neither do we. You're watching Soviet Files, the stories the Western world was never meant to hear. Subscribe and stay in the files.